Endpoint security is designed to protect every device in your fleet, wherever it may be. These days, that can be a lot of different places. Find out how HP Wolf Security uses emerging strategies like application isolation, along with a zero-trust approach and framework to give you a powerful, manageable, usable solution to your growing and increasingly spread-out security challenges. Learn how HP Wolf Security can make a difference across your endpoints at securityweekly.com/HPWolf. Account takeovers, malicious campaigns, impersonation, and data breaches are on the rise, driven by the pandemic and security challenges of a remote workforce. The number one most common attack vector in breaches is compromised credentials. Constellar Intelligence protects your key employees from digital risk by continuously monitoring the deep, dark, and surface web for exposed credentials, detecting threats that others miss with real-time alerts to protect you and your company from a targeted attack. Try it free at securityweekly.com/Constellar. Cyber risk and compliance automation is finally here. Legacy GRC systems cannot support the powerful, real-time automation and oversight that organizations require to take risks that matter to succeed. CyberSync continuous control automation ingests data from the IT GRC stack to update controls against regulatory requirements and risks in real time, delivering insights and visibility. See how members of the Fortune 500 are saving millions annually by visiting securityweekly.com/cybersane.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Jason Albuquerque, joined by Ben Carr and Tyler Robinson. Don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to any of our podcast feeds and have all new episodes downloaded right to your phone. You can also join our mailing list, Discord server, and follow us on social media and our streaming platforms. If you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover on one of the shows, submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and completing the form. We review suggestions monthly and we'll reach out once they're reviewed. All right, gentlemen, let's get into the leadership articles here. I grabbed a few articles trying to play my best Matt as I could and really leaned in. The first article that I have is kind of a response to the Gartner article that came out in March, and it was their top security risk management and trends for 2022. It was a report. And, on VentureBeat, the author actually came out and said, you know what, I'd like to take that report and translate that into a roadmap. So just to kind of skip back, the Gartner report came out and said, here are some of the top security and risk management trends: attack surface expansion, identity threat detection and response, digital supply chain, vendor consolidation, distributing decisions across the organization. And then really this article and the author said, let me build a roadmap around this so CISOs have the ability to have a strategy to implement these. What are your thoughts?
I like the phased approach and the roadmap. Honestly, things that we try and push very heavily is identifying those roadmaps so that they have a very clear picture of where to prioritize resources. It's not that CISOs don't know what the problems are or they don't know what they need to be doing. It is, how do you prioritize those, put those in a meaningful manner, and then build out a roadmap that you can actually put a timeline to with the resources and budget that you have. And I think, well, this is a really good article, and I think they kind of hit the nail on the head a little bit. I still think it is so far high level that there's not anything that is as actionable as CISOs need. I think they need, they don't need all the nitty-gritty technical, but they need a pretty actionable item list, and it is not this high level. I think it needs to get in the weeds, and I think we need to be better from the technical standpoint of providing those in the weeds areas for CISOs to follow.
Yeah, no, agreed. A framework is always good to have. Like you mentioned, Tyler, this is probably a 30,000-foot view, right? They broke it up into 3 different sections: responding to threats, rethinking technology, and really reframing the practice, right? And having that framework is good, having that guidance is good, but being able to drive down deeper into the controls and best practices is where we need to get.
Yeah, the only thing I would say with this is I think, a lot of times when you think about, phase 1, 2, and 3, phase 1 is the things you're doing. Phase 2 is the things you'll probably get to. And phase 3 is, well, I don't know. Things might change by the time I get there, right? When I look at this, distributing decisions and beyond awareness, I don't know. Culture for me is just a big one. And if I think about an awareness perspective, I think that's got to be done pretty early, and you've got to get momentum from a culture mentorship to be able to engage in a lot of these other things. So that was my one comment for where this sits in the roadmap.
Yeah, no, agreed. I mean, one of the topics that I talked about was decentralizing cybersecurity, right? And how cybersecurity needs that extreme ownership from across the organization. And extreme ownership is one of the faves of the leadership books that we talk about here all the time. But trying to get that culture to have that level of ownership across all of the different business units.
Yeah, I mean, your next article kind of covers that. I actually, as much as I'm not a huge fan of some of the Forbes articles, the next article, number 3, is not focusing on security culture change as being a mistake. I think you're right on. I think that is probably my number one priority when I come into an organization is what is their culture currently? What is the support top down and bottom up? And then how do I enable that business or all those business units to become more security aware and embrace a security culture that actually affects good change through positivity?
Yeah, that's why I brought this article in, Tyler. It's the article is 3 cybersecurity fundamentals that businesses get wrong. And, it's a scenario like you hit on. Sometimes you need to walk in and understand the current state, right? You need to know what the current state of affairs is, how the business operates, what the culture of the organization is, and then from there build that trust. From there, change hearts and minds, and there shift the security culture. So, I'm dead on when it comes to the security culture side. It's a journey, and it's something that you have to take your time and understand the business and build those relationships with the business unit leaders in order to make that shift. And sometimes it goes slow, right? Sometimes you do have to spend time changing hearts and minds.
And I think when I read this second article, it highlighted back. We talk about a lot of the same stuff every time, right? And it's the same truisms, and these don't seem like earth-shattering concepts that I would question. Like, well, why haven't we thought of this in the past? Like, I think we have. And so I guess I'm still shocked that like people are struggling, like, with the way budgets are. I don't know how a lot of CISOs can really spend money on some of the tools that, you come in after them or you talk to them as colleagues and you're like, yeah, how did you get down that road with tool spend before you addressed, really policy and people, right? And people first. And then, I love the compliance and regulation tools of being more secure. I think that's because for a lot of the history of security, we've used that as a leverage point to get some of the things done that we need, but it's completely the backwards approach to how you actually do security. You do security because it's the right thing to do, and out of that you get compliance and regulatory needs being addressed. We beat the culture thing to death. So those are my thoughts.
No, and absolutely. I mean, this is a recent article. This came out April 1st, right, of this year, and it was based on...
Oh, maybe it's a joke.
No. It's actually based on a report that I drove into, right? So, an insurance carrier, Hiscox, actually did a 2022 cyber readiness report. And this is information coming out of that readiness report where they evaluated, over the course of 2021, what the status was. And these are things that businesses are still getting wrong. And Ben, I think I've said it here before, these are items that are say easy, do hard, right? At the end of the day, it's say easy to say, I'm going to change the security culture. It's do hard. It's the easy button to check a box for compliance. It's do hard to actually get those security controls in place. So that way compliance is a byproduct of strong security. And then easy button, spend money on tools, more blinky lights. We'll solve it.
Yeah. New tool is going to solve it instead of really addressing the core problem of, your people and your process are messed up.
Eventually the epiphany is going to hit and we're going to realize we got to do the hard things to make this right.
I mean, this is the thing. Like, CISOs really do need the tools to drill down. It's but how? Like, that's like my favorite saying whenever I'm seeing all these people, they'll talk about threat actors, they'll talk about TTPs, they'll talk about, how we fix all this. And it's always a 30,000 mile view for like, we just need to do more security awareness. We need to spend more money on the right tools. Yeah. But how? All right. So like, how do you actually implement this? How do you build a roadmap? What are the fundamentals and priorities to get right? Because, these are all the same things we're harping on: culture, fundamentals, getting the basics right, getting your tool spend where it needs to be, investing in people. Like, okay, great, 30,000 miles. Now, how do we actually do that right? And I think this is where the veterans, like people like you, Ben, and Jason, that have been around the block for a while, done this a lot. you can start to see the experience notches, and you start to see the mindsets at the top level and how they're affecting change in multiple environments and corporations because they've had to figure out the how. And so I think we need more from the veterans, as well as getting people to stop saying the 30,000 feet view. Like, yes, we need to know that. Yes, it's important. Good articles, but let's provide our CISOs and our executives with something that is actionable and meaningful now.
Yeah. And that's why I brought this next article into play, right? Because, it's an article that talks about the American public, but I feel that this translates into the business arena, right? So the article is tech leaders must raise awareness and build trust to close the cybersecurity gaps. And the cliff notes is there's an erosion of trust among Americans with computer networks keeping their devices safe, keeping their data secure. And it came out and said 9 out of 10 people have concerns about cyber threats, but less than half of them are doing the basics to protect themselves. One of the strategies that I had used within my organization is with cybersecurity awareness, let's take it to personal lives. Let's not just make it all about the business. Let's make it about protecting people in general, protecting their data, protecting their PII. And when the good habits are there at home, they're going to drive those into the workforce, right? And they're going to bring them into the workforce. So I thought this was very interesting. I mean, having 9 out of 10 people have concerns, but less than half of those folks are actually protecting themselves at home.
Yeah, I think it's the way we do the training and awareness, and we actually talk and broadcast these concepts out. Is people think it's like a higher level of need for the corporate environment, right? And I guess at a high level, the corporation's concerned about protecting its assets, and it's their assets and not yours. And so there's a different thought process there. But we don't do that great of an engagement of saying, these same concepts, MFA, like you should make sure MFA is enabled across everything you can in your personal life as well. And right. I think missing that messaging does go a ways to, make it seem like, well, it's not my stuff, so I'm not going to take a concern for it. I'm not going to take that added step of insuring it, or I'm not going to do the due diligence because it's not my information. The corporate's protecting it, right? Where if everything was, the basic level that everybody did from a security standard was what we expect everybody to do in their personal lives as well, I think it would just be seen as the norm, and we would see a lot less concern in the corporate world.
Yeah, agreed. I feel table stakes has no bounds, right? And it's not bound by just the company. Let's educate our workforce to protect themselves, to protect their families, to protect everything around them, and then that attitude spreads into the workplace as well.
I think a lot of that is on us, and the ownership comes back to how we frame this. We've done a poor job over the years of really making this personal and identifying like, hey, your job and the well-being of our company relies on your ability to help us ensure security, and these breaches have a direct correlation and impact from the general public standpoint of maybe additional attacks, supply chain, vendors being exposed, your credentials that then correlate over to your banking and your personal well-being. So we've really got to frame this so that, one, people have the ability to see the connections and make the leap, because we're talking about people that aren't, doing multifaceted strategic visioning all the time, like it's 15-second, TikToks. So that correlation and that jump is not often made by the general public. So we have to help reframe some of that, as well as keep putting onus on the vendors so that they see the correlation of, they may be a small vendor, they may be a meat packing place. It's not a huge deal. It, hurts their bottom line in the company, but those supply chains and the correlations to the attacks that can then be leveraged from each of those, we're all interconnected. We really have to start to put the ownership around all of us with inside of, a vertical, the United States, the general public. Those things all matter, and especially in the larger geopolitical atmosphere that we're in now, they make a huge difference.
Yeah, no, agreed. And this next article is going to key into it a little bit, but it's why I've always had the approach. And I mean, folks who watch the show know I spent some time in the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps has a model where they basically say, listen, we're here to protect. We're here as a war fighting force. Every single Marine is going to be a basic rifleman. Everybody, no matter your MOS, no matter what job you have, no matter where you are within the Marine Corps organization, you're going to be a basic rifleman and you're going to have that expertise that you can bring to the field if and when we need you. I feel the same about cybersecurity. Every worker should be or have that basic cybersecurity fundamentals within the workforce, right? And be able to take that where they're going and protect their organizations. And this next article keys into it, as far as having, a workforce right now that is 600,000 cybersecurity open jobs, negative unemployment, by 600,000 jobs. That's an incredible amount of open jobs within the U.S. workforce that's out there right now. We can't get the talent. So shouldn't we have folks with basic skills and that shared responsibility across the entire organization, knowing that this is what's going on in the workforce?
But I mean, if you take that perspective, right, there was a sentence in here that I really keyed off of. It said, our critical infrastructure, our way of life is really under cyber assault all the time, and that was a quote from Jen Easterly. So, I mean, if you look at that, really, like it's still, man, I can't wrap my heads around the fact that we have a space force, but not a cyber force, right? Like the cyber protection of the United States is really spread out among different organizations, and it's not being treated as an attack. I mean, it's being treated as kind of a business issue. And I think, from a perspective side, if we foundationally changed our approach and actually put the right emphasis on that, I mean, it would build up, a quantity, a cadre of people coming into those ranks actually being proactively trained. I mean, if you look at what's happening in Israel with the number of people that's being brought into the IDF on a cyber side, it's a constant pump back into their business side from people exiting service. And I don't understand why we're not connecting those dots, and why I don't know why we haven't taken this more seriously, because it is constantly under threat and attack, right? And this is the new hot war, is on the cyber side. And I think we're seeing that with some of the stuff that's happening in Ukraine, some of the stuff that happened ahead of that from Russia against a lot of different areas of our infrastructure and others. I'm just extremely concerned that we're just not giving it the due diligence that it really needs and treating it on the level of importance. Yeah,
and in the absence of the government getting involved and kind of forcing that to the plate, what do we do within private industry? Do we do to ease this gap, right? Things that have gone through my head are apprenticeship programs. And you guys know, I'm heavily involved in the Department of Education trying to get cybersecurity into CTE programs at a high school level, working with universities on strengthening their cybersecurity programs and marketing their programs. What do we do? Because we need to stop the bleeding here, right? Obviously, we need to be thinking long-term in programs like you mentioned, Ben, but what do we do to stop the bleeding?
I think a lot of that...
Go ahead, Tyler.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, I think a lot of that really comes back to our inability to, as professionals, to get involved, or we don't have a great pipeline for involvement. By the time training gets built and training companies build it, it is irrelevant and not typically anything that anybody needs in order to do the jobs that we have outlined here. We've got to short circuit what has taken many of us, 2 decades to get up to speed and really be good at our jobs. We've got to get that down to kind of the 5-year mark. And that's being probably a little optimistic, and that's definitely backfill of 600 jobs. So whether that is the government stepping up and offering, paying for education that matters, that is actually doing good certifications, that things in the industry that are working and providing ways to have that paid off, and then, doing service time or however that looks, or backfilling some of that through programs that employers can offer, where they can volunteer some time for training, offer up good resources to do internship, apprenticeship. All of those pieces are very important, but we have to do all of them unless we want to be a country like Israel, where we're requiring 2 years and we're pushing people through really good programs and forcing them to Israel is doing in order to build that cyber army, because we are way behind, and the number of us that are getting to the point where we burn out or have been doing this long enough that we may not have, that could become a reality in the next 5 years, and we have to short circuit what we're providing back to the next generation to backfill some of that.
I would go so far as to say the lack of talent in the industry right now is a national security issue. it really should be treated as such, because just the numbers don't justify it. When you look at IT budgets as a percentage of revenue, and you look at security budgets as a percent of IT revenue, there's just no way that you're going to be able to fund. I mean, it talks about, the max on federal cybersecurity workers could make up to $255,000, which is the same as the vice president. But exiting service, the vice president has a lot further potential for income. So that 255 is not really as low a number as it seems for the vice president, right? Where on the cyber side, the salaries are just out of control, right? You've seen this response from Google raising their potential max salaries as well to a pretty significant number. I really think if we don't treat this as a national security issue and address it as such, we're going to find ourselves in a bad spot not too far in the future.
Yeah, and
I think we have the right? Like with Jen coming in and what CISA is doing, like I think we have some key people and key pieces in place to make these adjustments. But you're right on. This comes all the way up to the very, very top of our government decision, the places that we're putting emphasis, putting money, putting budget, outside of even the commercial space. Like if we can get people involved and provide good mission and means to get into the government at a rate where we're not all starving, that's where we start to make good effect. But that does rely on a lot of the commercial places to do their due diligence and help offer some incentives to maybe let people go or move them on, or there's a lot of creative ideas. We're a very smart group. I think we just have not had the initiatives and the people at the higher ranks like we do now in order to kind of get some of those creative ideas moving.
And I think you're both right. It's not just, I mean, I don't want to come out sounding like it's just a federal. I think it's a public-private partnership thing that we have to get worked out here. But I think it's just hard given what I've seen. And Jason, I'm sure you've seen the same thing, right? Like funding isn't just going to miraculously give you another 30 spots to hire people on an internship basis. It just won't work.
Right. And time isn't on our side either, right? I mean, this next article kind of shows that. I mean, the next article is all about the 8th annual State of Cybersecurity 2022 global update on workforce, and ISAC put that out, and it's about we're in the highest cybersecurity retention difficulty that we've ever seen in years, right? And right now we're seeing organizations that are losing cybersecurity talent when it's scarce as it is. And they're losing it to things like being recruited by other companies, insufficient salaries, like we just talked about, limited advancement opportunities, stress, the burnout that Tyler mentioned, and then just poor management support all in, not having support from the C-level executives or the board of directors or the CEO. That's creating a lot of shift, and it's the highest we've seen in a long, long time.
Well, look, I was actually surprised that poor management support was number 5 on the list at only 34%. But if you look at the other ones, I would say, maybe without regard to high stress level, they're really related to compensation and career path, right? It's really what it is. So, people are getting lured away because other companies are offering more money. They're not feeling that they're well compensated in their job now, and they don't have anywhere to go from a career direction path. So, of course, people are going to leave for those reasons. And I'm thinking right now, like the reason why those 3 are at the top and outweighed poor management support is because right now the market's so hot with 600,000
because
people
they can be
at a negative, right? I mean, it's a supply and demand issue.
Exactly it. And if the supply was there probably wouldn't be this much effect. So that's why these 2 articles I looked at, they go really, really well together, because we don't have the talent, and it's spawning a lot of this shift and retention issues that we as leaders are dealing with all the time. It's hard.
And if you look at these things, instead of looking at these things independent, because I'm sure they're often interrelated. While somebody may have said this is their number 1, if you've got a high stress level and you're not getting paid, man, your time is short, right? You're not going to stay there. Like you've got to figure out ways to incentivize your teams and make it a great place to be. Otherwise, you're always going to be fighting this, exiting staff problem.
That goes back to the culture thing you talked about, though. Like really getting this culture correct is very important. And that means inside of the security department first. Like if you're not providing a good workplace for your people, you really have to think, especially if you're a manager, you have to think about how much time and money and effort it takes to get good candidates. And then the institutional knowledge that you're losing when you lose good candidates, that could be worth a simple spot bonus of $1,000. That could be shifting around schedules so that people are flexible, offering some of these minute things in the grand picture of how you have to go about hiring talent, and maybe not even able to find talent is a big picture.
What's the opportunity cost, right? Like of losing somebody, or like not hiring somebody for 3 or 6 months, right? I mean, I think if you really think about it, you talked about, thinking about what you could do to retain. If you're not bringing people in the office and you're saving, if you could calculate, now I'm going to say that I've seen stats that say, somewhere between $6,000 to $15,000 a year per employee.
Oh, I think we lost some of Ben's audio.
Oh, I thought it was my audio.
Nope, I think we lost some of Ben's audio. But that being said, I mean, this plays really into the next article that we want to cover, right? Companies are going to huge lengths to hire cybersecurity staff, and the article goes through, how that shift in workforce, because of the Great Resignation, because all of the things that we just talked about, have led companies to just do, ridiculously high salaries, benefits, training, certifications, just to get these candidates in, because that pool is so limited.
Yeah, I mean that's a problem, right? Like you spend all this time incentivizing, building these packages, building all of these and if you're getting the job piece right and you're actually getting good candidates to apply, like you really do need to look at the people you have in place as well as you're doing all this hiring. You've got to keep a good org chart. You've got to keep them challenged. Like I think outside of the compensation, we're all very, very high performers. We require a few things, and that is novelty, that is a continual challenge, that is appreciation. Those fundamental things don't always equate to money. You can equate some of that, and some of those do fit with inside of the compensation, but you can get creative and provide some of outside of the monetary, the value that many high performers are looking for in order to maintain that retention. So as you're hiring new people, you have to consider what you're hiring, how to retain them, but also how to retain them long-term and retain the people that you already have, which is a bigger strategy that requires a lot more effort. This is something that takes effort, but it is meaningful and it matters.
Yeah. And I, honestly, I think another piece to that is how do you start grooming a bench within your organization already, right? Where you can start taking people who may have some real world experience, who may have an attitude and an aptitude to jump into those roles. I'm constantly saying it's really, really hard to be a unicorn hunter. I'd rather be a unicorn farmer and really build that talent pool internally and figure out ways to build apprenticeship programs, shadowing programs, because you can find your next, security expert or security talent in your organization already. I was going to say 4 walls, but in your organization already, if you just put the effort in to groom them and create programs and get the folks who have the right attitude and aptitude up to speed.
Yeah, I mean that goes back to that good leadership. Like if you are doing good leadership and mentoring, that means you're cultivating, it means you're grooming the next generation, the people to replace you. You're making sure that your team is happy, that they're satisfied, that they have all the tools that they need and the things for their personal lives in order to maintain and keep them. That is way better than being able to attract talent, have a sexy job, do cool stuff. Like all those things are important. But the more important thing is all of those can go away if you don't respect it, honor that, and continually move forward and progress that.
Yeah, and then the last article that we want to cover is how do you get to that progress, and HR is a critical role in this, right? The article goes through and it says company culture is in a lot of ways defined by HR because it has that responsibility of hiring people, and they have certain responsibilities within the organization. Now, I don't feel it's limited to just the 2 that he mentions in the article here, that basically says first, they're responsible for ensuring every employee is hired, and secondly, an obligation to protect employees' personal data. I think it's above and beyond that. I think they're a great stakeholder in strategies to hire new talent. I think it's very important to have HR involved in recruiting new talent, but I think it's beyond just these 2. But the key to this is how important a relationship is with HR to be successful in hiring that next set of talent.
And I don't know. I guess you guys lost me before, but hopefully you can hear me. I'm back.
Yep, you're back, Ben. You're back.
Awesome. Hey, so I did want to jump in on this HR one because it's actually a I don't know, like a pet peeve of mine, right? Like I look at security and HR as probably the two red-haired stepchilds of the organization, right? Where people just like are loath to deal with them. But I think actually like making partnerships with the HR team can pay a lot of dividends. And the reason why I say that is, we talk a lot about cultural change, and I think HR is one of your key windows into cultural change at the organization. And if you partner and make a strong bond with the HR leader at your org, I think you can really set yourself up for success in determining what is the culture, how do you fundamentally start to shift it, and how do you develop that key stakeholder alignment that's really going to pay off dividends in the long run.
Yeah.
Not just the hiring and the firing, as you mentioned.
Well, some of that falls under what we've talked on the show about the BSO role. And even I would say the CISO should be doing this as part of his function, where you're making those interconnections, you're having that those inner relationships. You've got some political clout between different groups because you've spent the time cultivating those relationships and integrating yourself so you know the needs, and then correlating that back to HR, because it is a little scary that HR is
Oh, I think we lost Tyler.
That should probably.
I agree, Tyler.
One for each.
There, he's back. He's back.
No worries, gents. But listen, hey, thank you guys so much for being part of this. This was the first time at the helm. I hope Matt will be proud of me.
Good job,
Thanks
man.
for joining us, listeners. Matt's back next week, so we'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly. Thank you, everybody.